What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got Liam from Azusa as well as Dillinger Escape Plan. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate giving me the opportunity to rant about my band.
Of course, it's an honor. First thing is always first. The newest album is Loop of Yesterdays. You do have a couple of singles out, such as Kill, Destroy, Monument, Detach. Could this almost serve as a clear preview or representation of what the entirety of Loop of Yesterdays is going to sound like, or is this just kind of like the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I got something in my throat. I'm sorry. It's not a virus, I promise. Yeah, I mean, it's, I would say, not unlike a lot of album singles, we're trying to put our best feet forward and also, the most palatable stuff, I guess. I do think there's there's one really, there's one very light track. I think there's other, similarly heavy tracks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty preview of the whole thing. I think there might only be one total blind side. But yeah, no, I think that's, and also coming off the last record, it's not exactly the same, but you're going to, everything is going to sound like it came from this record, if that makes any sense.
Definitely. Do you consider this just like a direct follow-up to Heavy Yoke, or do you think that Loop of Yesterdays is kind of like a new start for Azusa?
It's both, I guess. I mean, Heavy Yoke, a lot of that was written before we really knew each other, before we really knew what we were going to do. I had never met, David or Krista or Eleni, and Eleni had never met me. There might be some other unknowns there. But basically, Krista and David started writing this stuff. And I mean, really, some of the earliest riffs from Heavy Yoke were written back when Expo was doing the Synergy record. So some of those things were just orphan ideas that finally got finished. But like I said, they didn't really know my personality. They didn't really, they know my playing style in Dillinger, but that's only indicative of how I play in Dillinger. Mm-hmm. So, some of our strengths, some of our, things that we want to lean into, things that we want to avoid. There's definitely things that came up for them that I may have been well, I don't want to do that because that's what I would have done in Dillinger, and I've done that 10 times. So for me to make it exciting, let's try it this way. So Heavy Yoke, a lot of discovery and experimentation and just kind of getting to know each other, in and out of the studio. And then this one was a little bit more okay, I know that Eleni's going to crush this, or I know that, what David and Chris are going to hand me, they know what they're handing me now, so they know how to get, how to tease the best out of me. There were things that happened when we were recording Heavy Yoke. Maybe halfway through it, I would do something in the studio, and David would say, oh, I didn't know that you could play like that, or I didn't know that that was in your vocabulary too. It was oh, well, you didn't ask. So this time around, I think there's more room for that kind of adventure. So yeah, and a lot of these songs. A lot of these ideas were things that were written around the time that Heavy Yoke was written, but never finished. Or, we kind of had the Heavy Yoke album, and those songs sounded good together. And then some of these were okay, well, I think these are a little bit more like misfit toys, that fit into the catalog, but maybe I don't know, just have a different vibe. I think lyrically, this one is a little bit more personal and a little bit more adult, I guess is a word I've been trying to use, vague, but not like old and washed up, but just like the themes are just things that I don't think that you would deal with when you were younger. An example I used is like somebody like a Nick Cave. Like when you listen to Nick Cave's lyrics and approach in the birthday party, it's a lot different than Nick Cave's approach on his last record after losing a child.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in that vein of like, yeah, life just got really heavy for a lot of us, and there was also like a lot of joy, but like a lot of really personal challenges and struggles and trauma that was happening, kind of under the surface of this record.
Well, that kind of led me into my next question, because, like, do you kind of go into songwriting for Azusa with, like, do you and everybody else in the band have, like, a preconceived idea of what you want it to sound like, or do things kind of, like, happen organically? You mentioned that there's a lot of personal subject matter on here, so maybe could the subject matter determine the music itself?
I mean, again, I think it's a both and as opposed to an either or situation. I think, there were things that we did on the last record where we were like, that worked, that didn't. More of that, less of that. And some of it's just like casual conversation. I don't know how much of it is like we sat down and we made a game plan. So much is just the culmination of 2 years of constructive criticism and conversation just kind of, organically made things, made certain decisions happen the way they did. Some of them were more conscious, some of them were more subconscious, some of them were more like, I know we discussed that. Did you do that on purpose? And then maybe like a yes or no. I didn't, but I remember that now. I think the lyrics are a little bit more on their sleeve, or a little bit more like, the content is definitely is indicative of everything that's been happening for certain members. And then I know that for me, certain lyrical, like say if I was tracking a song and the vocals were tracked before I got there. So I got to hear the way the vocals were and the way the melody went, and maybe heard some of the lyrics, like if the theme of a certain part heavy or sour or sad, I maybe, had an on-the-spot decision to be like, oh, I've got to play, like, the lowest octave of that note that's on the bass as opposed to playing higher. Mm-hmm. It could be a choice like that, but it might make all the difference. Or like, oh, I need to find an even grosser harmony for whatever is happening here. Or, I don't know. I mean, I think it's all like the creative process is I'm not sure if you've ever seen those memes of like what people think the creative process is, and it's just like a straight line trending up, and what the creative process actually is, and it just looks like a hairball.
Yeah.
With like an arrow sticking out one side. It's very much that.
Yeah. That's the most accurate meme I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's tough. I think with music we definitely have. I think when you're making art, especially like three-dimensional art, maybe it seems a little bit more game plan-ish. Whereas music kind of happens in like stops and starts, and maybe the music is going in one direction, but the lyrics are coming from a different place at a different pace. And as a bass player, like, admittedly, I'm neither like the core songwriter or lyricist. So I kind of feel like they're the architects and the engineers, and I'm just kind of doing some like finished woodworking and maybe like painting the walls.
Yeah, definitely. And like, what I was always curious about since I first heard the Heavy Yoke record was kind of like the intention of Azusa to kind of like combine your experiences with the Dillinger Escape Plan and X-Toll and Sea and Air, or did you guys kind of like intentionally wanted to do something that like you never really did before?
Well, I mean, I guess I could answer that question in either a different or, hopefully not repeating myself kind of way, but we didn't really know, when a lot of the songs on Heavy Yoke, especially like, Interstellar Islands or Heavy Yoke itself or Iniquitous Spiritual Praxis, like, a lot of those songs were like handed to me as demos pretty fully formed. So, my approach was just kind of like, I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to show up to Oslo with this stuff demoed out the way I would approach a Dillinger song, and then let the last 10 to 20, I'll show up with 100%, or I'll show up with 90% of my ideas formed, and save room to kind of pivot, because I know that some of these ideas aren't going to work, or I know that other people are going to have ideas that are going to be better than mine, or the combination of our two ideas are going to be, better than either of our individual ideas. So, I don't necessarily think they wrote it with me in mind, at least not the first half of it. And then even more of it was done, before we really even started talking to Eleni. Mm-hmm. So, initially we had kind of talked about, I guess naturally defaulting to a male vocalist idea. And we tossed around a couple names, and it was just or a couple ideas, or even styles that we would imagine over it. And we were just kind of hitting, kind of checkmate every time. And then I did a tour where I was filling in with Mirker, and being on stage with her, and kind of having a female energy on stage, and hearing the different range that a female has compared to Greg from Dillinger. I was wow, this is really refreshing, and that was one of the things that for me felt new, and it felt new and exciting, and something I wanted to explore more. So I remember coming back to David and saying after this tour, I really think that maybe the direction we should go in is a female. Do you know anybody? So he mentioned Eleni, and that was kind of the first and only person we thought of, and it just kind of happened to work out. So on Heavy Yoke, it was a little less tailored to everybody, and this time around it was, obviously we already have the band made, so it wasn't like we were going to change that much now, but I think certain songwriting decisions were made with the membership in mind. Yeah. And like I said, our strengths, playing to our strengths, and things that we didn't want to do.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like, from telling me about the formation of the band, it seems like everything happened organically, but you guys didn't go into it blindfolded, you know what I mean? It seems like you had the perfect bridge of letting things happen organically, but also guiding it, and so you kind of knew what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, Krister and David certainly have a history and a style, and even though, like I said, I play a certain way in Dillinger, I also play a certain way. So them asking me, and so two members of Extol and one from Dillinger, you're kind of already in the ballpark of what it might sound like. So I don't think it totally caught people by surprise. I think when people heard the single, and even though I don't necessarily agree with it, people are like, "Oh, I hear, all three bands in there." And I'm like, "Oh, do you?" I don't know. I mean, I guess I do. But it's also hard for me to be objective.
Well, I got the Heavy Yoke promo for review, actually, before I read anything or knew anything about the band, and I had no idea that it was members of Dillinger and Extol and that. So I think, and then, after reading about it and then going back at it, I was like, oh, I see some, bass tones from Irony's a Dead Scene on here and all that stuff. But, after reading about you guys, I kind of went into it more knowing what I was listening to. So...
Right.
Yeah. For you, kind of I ask every artist who's in multiple projects this, but I feel like you are a very, very prolific artist, obviously from Dillinger Escape Plan, Azusa, but also, playing with Starkweather and Frodos and all these other great bands. Is it a different mind frame depending on all the projects that you're playing in, or is there maybe kind of a usual creative method behind the madness that could apply to all of them, since you are bringing the same brain to everything?
I mean, wherever I go, there I am. So there's going to be that, but Starkweather was something I did when I was 20. Frotus was something I did admittedly, and almost hilariously, I never really listened to Frotus. I just was really, I loved Jason and Shelby from the band and had toured with their other band, Dodecahedron. No, wait, that's not right. Dodecahedron is the the metal band, Decahedron.
Okay.
So I just like really liked their personalities. So when they reunited, they asked me to do it, and I had to like go back and like kind of hear Frodis for the first time. So that was the situation, and Starkweather to some extent, at least in the beginning, like, you know, we were writing new material, but it was also, you know, me stepping into somebody else's shoes. So as a bass player, I'm just kind of out there blocking for touchdown. You know, and you know, early Dillinger, you know, I was kind of filling in Adam's shoes and just trying to have like a what would Adam do approach, while still like, you know, slowly introducing my own thing, but also kind of respecting the tradition. So, you know, in those situations, it was a little bit more like, you know, I'm walking into somebody else's thing and trying to be respectful and not like, you know, mess it up. You know, and as Dillinger progressed and as I felt more comfortable and as things were kind of written with me and with me in mind, I felt like it was easier for me to, you know, to do my thing because I wasn't trying to play somebody else's bass lines my way. Now I was playing bass lines that I wrote. Mm-hmm. You know, John Frum was like a situation where, you know, I got to do kind of, you know, really stretch out and really, you know, be like a core songwriter, and kind of goaltender for every idea that went through. Like the three of us, or, you know, Eli, Matt, and I really kind of like shedded that stuff hard and really kind of took, you know, each of us took the reins equally. So my approach there was, you know, pretty free form and pretty unlimited. Like I didn't really have anybody telling me what I couldn't do or what didn't work. And, you know, we all kind of gave each other a lot of room when it came to our parts. Like we'd get the song structure together, but what everybody played individually was pretty, you know, carte blanche. Azusa was a little bit more, you know, just because of the style of it, it kind of had to be a little bit more indicative of the riff. And even though I had my own style and, you know, but a lot of it came down to like, if David had a better idea, I would play David's idea. Mm-hmm. You know, and David is full of great ideas, so I was happy to default and be like, okay, that's cool. Or let me take your idea and push it an extra little bit and see where we get to. You know, it was exciting for me to work with them, you know, David and Krister, because as an X-Toll fan, I kind of wanted to like get under the hood, you know, and see what it was that like made that sound so unique, and just kind of hear how they approach things. So I was happy to kind of, like I said, block for touchdowns.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't even remember what else I was going to say.
No, you answered it perfectly, and I was like, I mean,
actually, I do. Just the other like, and then I think that besides like wherever I go, there I am, and how I may progress like over time as a musician. There's also the muse, and like I feel like there is a lot of my development or realization lately that like I'm not necessarily coming up with these ideas so much as I'm like transmitting them, and you know, I'm just kind of a medium for them, you know, and I try to, you know, over the years I've tried to dilute the ego part of it, the part of me that says I'm awesome and the part of me that says I suck. I'm trying not to listen to it as much and just kind of let it happen. So the more I like open myself up to that, I also think that that's like another stage in my approach and development.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'd imagine
that's my long answer.
That was one of the best answers to any question I've ever asked in any interview. So thank you for that. That was amazing.
Okay.
One thing I was curious, but like when you look at the entirety of your discography, whether it's with The Loop of Yesterdays or Heavy Yoke, or even looking from Irony as a Dead Scene to Miss Machine to Disassociation to Sound Lab, like it almost has to be somewhat representative of who you were at that particular time, right?
Of course, yeah. And time and place, and you know, set and setting have such a major part in everything. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I have two more questions for you, if we have time for that. We're in 20 minutes, so
yeah. Whatever.
You ready for the most difficult question? I wasn't going to ask it, but you seemed like the right person to ask this to. How How do you
Okay,
know?
try me.
How do you know when a song is done?
Uh, um, I was just saying this to my daughter today. The idea that artists, or that artwork is never done is just abandoned.
Yeah, I get that all the time. It's such an easy way out.
Yeah, so I mean but it's kind of true. And I guess it's done when like you can't fuck with it anymore. Like it's done when it's when you hit save and close the session, I guess. But I think it's just kind of like an internal sense. One, it has to do with like the nature of the craftsmanship that you need to bring to it. So like, if you're playing and you're sloppy, then you gotta, come back to it later and finish it when you're up to speed, or change. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So it might be a matter of saying, well, I can't play that, or the idea that I had, it just actually doesn't sound good, no matter how well, like I might be nailing it, but it just kind of still sounds bad. There's been a lot of times where I come in and I try to play, like I double the guitars or I double the kick, and I'm like, it actually just sounds like shit. I'm going to play like extra slow. I think John Frum was like a great example of like, I'm going to do like we're going to just really fuck with contrast. We're going to have a blast beat and like an extra slow riff over it. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just kind of like an internal sense of like, okay, I can't really do any more to this, or I don't know. There's also this the concept. Every time I've tried to look up, like Google this term, I can't find it. I don't know where I heard it, but I'm just going to keep repeating it anyway. This idea of the Persian stitch. I would love to have somebody like correct me where this came from, but the idea is essentially like a master carpet maker would intentionally leave one or two stitches or something out, or like they would kind of mess up the design in some deliberate way so as not to compete with God, like so as not to make it so perfect. So I think there's that kind of, other people might call it like wabi-sabi. I think it's just kind of a matter of knowing when you find that like cool balance of like, I think it's also, maybe I'll go in a different direction and say that like when you have a feeling and you are able to put it down and then have somebody else hear it and tell you what you meant. And I'm not saying that all music especially has that like clear intention, but like I guess it's just kind of like if I can play something for somebody and they're impressed, or when I feel like I shouldn't say that. That's kind of a silly way of putting it. But like maybe when I do something and it sounds like I almost have imposter syndrome, where I'm like enjoying it in a way that's kind of like did I do that? Or like, or it just kind of sounds better than I thought we were capable of doing. Collectively or as an individual, like when you kind of achieve this thing that's like kind of above yourself and above your expectation and beyond your own like sense of limitation. I don't know. I'm just tossing, I'm kind of riffing on this question because I don't really have a strong answer. I think you just kind of know.
Yeah.
But when I try to verbalize that, it doesn't really sound like a very interesting response. And you didn't like my first response, so I felt like I had to really,
It's not that I didn't like it, I just get that all the time. It's just like the ultimate default
No,
answer.
you're right. It's a cop-out. I'm just, I approach a lot of these questions from like an art school dropout background.
I went to art school as well, so.
Right on.
Yeah, I went to SVA, so.
Where'd you go?
SVA, School of Visual Arts.
Savannah. What is it?
The School of Visual Arts in Manhattan.
I got you.
And I went to the
Okay.
same performing arts camp as Ben Wyman, I might also add.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I studied woodworking, and I currently work in a sculpture foundry. But yeah, I mean, and it's kind of cool thinking about things from the art perspective and just kind of using that vocabulary. Like a common woodworking thing would be measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot with bass playing and trying, or like less is more. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask a different question, but now that you mentioned that you work in art, I have an even better question than I wanted to ask for the last one, because I love asking artists who work in multiple mediums this question. But, working in visual art and working in, woodworking and sculpture refining, like, is there maybe, is almost kind of like the creative energy different depending on the medium that you're working with too? Or is there maybe a similar creative energy into visual art as there is with sonic art?
I think for me, it's different. I don't know. I guess, the simple answer is, like, I think it's different. But I do think that, like, that creative energy is kind of coming from the same place. I don't know. I certainly, don't approach woodworking the same as the way... I guess I approach it the same, but, like, I'm obviously not trying to do the same things. I would sit around and watch YouTube videos and, like, take bass lessons from a YouTube video, but I don't often sit around and watch, like, woodworking videos. But I know people who do. Mm-hmm. I think that, I don't know. There's some similarities because, like, I like craft in the sense that, like, I'm really into the idea of, like, function over form. Like, I would much rather have, like, shaker furniture. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're more into the creative process than the actual final composition in a way, right? Like, you're more interested in the process of getting there as opposed to the actual there that you're going for.
Well, that and just, like, I think, like, a lot of, like, technical or progressive music is, like, it's cool, but it kind of just sounds like music, if that means anything. Like, it doesn't make me feel anything. It just sounds like a bunch of notes. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's kind of like making a chair, and it looks like a chair, and it's really ornate, but when you sit on it, it falls apart, and it doesn't. You can't actually sit on it. Mm-hmm. So I think, like, it needs to function as a thing.
Yeah.
I don't really. It needs a purpose, and it needs to actually be able to, like, execute the purpose. Mm-hmm. So if music, like, is just for the sake of being, like, impressed, or, like, there's so many bands that are like, dude, they shred, and, like, but it's, like, basically just, like, a big ego masturbatory experiment, and, like, it's not very memorable. And to some extent, I'm sure the music I'm part of, I'm guilty of that, or, like, other people probably hear the music I make and think the same about that. So I guess it's all about, again, setting and, like, perspective. But I don't know. I do think there's a lot to be said about, like, where the creative juices come from. But my approach to different mediums, it's certainly there. Like, I don't know.
I just hope you don't do it in a wood shop.
That's my really wishy-washy answer. Yeah. What's that? Say that again?
I hope you don't do in a wood shop and what you did on stage with Dillinger Escape Plan. That sounds fairly
I shred. Yeah. I shred and I shred and I shred.
Crowd killing with a bandsaw?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and, like, working at a metal foundry is definitely, like, there's so many metal jokes.
Oh, God.
Like, I am so much more metal than you. And
oh my God, I can only imagine the amount of puns that could be utilized in there.
Yeah,
you're bringing back horror stories from art school, man. I got to go to therapy after this.
Yeah, I'm welding TIG welding bass lines together.
Oh man, that's actually wow, that's something you should track. Like, weld a bass line and see, like, if you could translate that into a track or something like that. That sounds like a really awesome idea.
It sounds like something. What's that band? Is it Matmos? Is that who I'm thinking of? They're like that. I think it's Matmos. I could be totally wrong, but like, they basically went into like a plastic surgeon's office and recorded, like, all these weird sounds and made a whole record out of it.
Oh wow.
It's wacky. It's the people who did Bjork's like Vespertine and, like, some of those albums. Like, they just have, like, super artsy concept albums.
Yeah. The one of my favorite black metal albums is the Stala and Gula, if I pronounce that right, record, where they just recorded like a mental asylum with like very distorted guitars and let screaming, people with severe mental illness just slam on the instruments, and they recorded that. It's one of the most horrifying albums you'll ever hear in your life.
Whoa. Yeah, send me somehow, get me a link to that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
That's pretty wild. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'd like to hear that.
Yeah. The album's called Project Misanthropia.
Okay.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Is there just anything else?
I appreciate the time, too.
Of course. Is there just anything else with Azusa you would like to promote? The album comes out next Friday. Can we be expecting any live shows when the virus that shall not be named clears up?
Oh, man. That is like the big question. Yeah, I mean, anything we were trying to get together is just kind of like, I don't know. I had a pretty long conversation with David this past weekend, and we spent a lot of time just like catching up and taking temperatures for how all this is affecting everybody, like emotionally and financially and all that. And we were just kind of talking about like what our options are, because anything we were trying to figure out is just kind of on hold. I had some summer tour plans with Devin Townsend, and I'm not going to say anything yet, but I could only assume that they're not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess it really, it's really hard to plan anything, and we're in a weird situation anyway, where just geographically speaking, it makes it really hard for us to just go out and play a couple shows, because it's not like we can throw everything in a station wagon and get together. It's like it's a matter of flights, and that costs money, and
yeah.
So unfortunately, we're kind of at the mercy of hopefully somebody will take us out on a support tour. If I'm trying not to put pressure on any old friends or bands that Dillinger took out, but I'm certainly looking at them like, hey, return the favor. And just like, don't you want to tour again? Like, we had fun. Let's go hang out again. So yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, it does come down to some financial requirements. But we did we did a few weeks last summer, and we had fun. And I kind of felt like we were just getting started and just getting warmed up, and then it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had some hiccups and some technical difficulties, and it's exciting just to get out and kind of be humbled again, and kind of like not be the headliner, and not not have everything at your disposal and a sound check and everything. It was really just kind of like throw and go.
Real East Coast metal.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do some shows, Azusa, John Frum. I mean, John Frum's writing some new material too. I just kind of want to stay active and just keep making music, keep cranking it out.
Yeah. Well, you'll always be welcome in New York City to play, so please play in New York City. I'll book you myself if I have to.
Right on. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But, Liam, thank you so much. Everybody, Liam.
Yeah, man, thank you for your time.
Of course.
For sure. Thank everybody for listening, and, Azusa on Instagram and Facebook, and you can follow me too. Yeah.
Awesome. Everybody.
Thanks.
Liam of Azusa, as well as Dillinger Escape Plan. Be sure to pick up Loop of Yesterday's out April 10th. Buy it then when supplies last forever. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.